Wallenberg Institute. As you've probably seen, there are a lot of other interesting seminars, and after this one you can listen to IM and about their human value in Israel and Palestine. I also want to take the opportunity to thank our enablers of the festival, Heja Lund, Sparbanksstiftelsen Finn, Institute of Human Rights, Sydsvenskan, and Anna Lindh Academy. So now I hand over to Amnesty International and Martin Lavicka. Welcome.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. First, I would like to thank the Amnesty International for organizing this event and inviting me. I would also like to thank the audience for coming on Saturday morning when there are more appealing attractions in pre-Christmas Lund. My name is Martin Lavicka, and I'm currently visiting researcher at the Center for East and Southeast Asia here at Lunds Universitet, but I'm also an assistant professor at the Department of Asian Studies at Lunds Universitet, Olomouc in the Czech Republic. My current research centers around the rule of law in China, but for about a decade, I've been also interested in Xinjiang, particularly in governmental policies and regulations concerning the Uyghurs living in the region. I want to stress that I do not consider myself an Xinjiang or East Turkestan specialist, but I will do my best to make a little introduction to the region that would complement the exhibition that you can see here in this building. So therefore, I prepared just a few slides with mostly pictures. Talking about Xinjiang and the Uyghurs here in Lund feels very special, as Lund has a particular connection to the region. You can find the so-called Yaring collection of Uyghur texts here at the Lund University Library, which is attracting researchers from all around the world. So everyone researching Uyghur, Xinjiang, Uyghur language knows about Lund and usually comes to Lund to see this collection. And you can also learn more about Yaring at the exhibition, also about the Swedish missionaries to the region of Xinjiang. So my plan for today is to give you a brief introduction about the region, its past, its kind of present state, and hint to what might be the future. But I must warn you that my talk isn't going to be really optimistic or envisioning better future. So it's not really a Christmas happy talk. So we should start with a basic overview and clarify some of the names you might hear concerning the region. Officially, the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region is the westernmost and largest administrative region of the People's Republic of China. You can see it here on the map. Before, it was known simply as Xinjiang, or I still use Xinjiang. I mean, it's way more practical to use Xinjiang than Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. And before that, the region was referred, for example, as the Western Territories, etc. The Xinjiang simply means new territory or new frontiers. Why? It dates back to mid-18th century when the region was conquered and became part of the Qing dynasty. Qing dynasty being the last ruling dynasty in China before China became a republic in 1912. Another name you might hear is the East Turkestan or Turkestan, and it's often used among the Uyghurs outside of China to, in a way, oppose the Chinese rule over the region. And for many Uyghurs, the term East Turkestan is very symbolic. It was used in two failed attempts to establish republic, independent of China. So here, just to give you some idea, the first East Turkestan Republic that was existing really shortly between 1933 and 1934, around kind of the cultural capital of Xinjiang, which is Kashgar. And the other one, the second East Turkestan Republic, that was existing around the city of Gulja, bordering Pakistan or Soviet Union at that time, which existed in 1944 and 1949. And quite conveniently, and I'm sure accidentally, when the leadership of the second East Turkestan Republic was flying over to Beijing to meet with Mao Zedong, their plane crashed, all the leadership died, and the second East Turkestan Republic was incorporated in the newly established People's Republic of China, and the East Turkestan Army was incorporated into the People's Liberation Army. Anyway, this kind of sentiment of the possibility to have an independent republic, China is really sensitive. China is really sensitive about this sentiment. Therefore, any uses of term like East Turkestan or any symbols referring to these East Turkestan republics are often considered a sign of separatism or extremism within the People's Republic of China, be it the flag or even be it the symbol of crescent. Here, that's the picture I took many years ago in Urumqi, which is the official capital of Xinjiang, and it basically shows what is banned, what you can wear, and you can see as the symbol of the East Turkestan Republic, even the crescent, you can't even dress up in a Turkish flag if you wanted to, because the symbol is forbidden. You see also that it's forbidden for women to wear face veiling, or for men to have a beard. And here you have a picture how you're supposed to look like if you want to look like a proper, nicely looking Uyghur living in Urumqi. So it's a really sensitive topic, and if you say East Turkestan in front of some Chinese official, they definitely won't be really happy about that. So most of China's population, over 91% of those 1.3 billion people, belong to Han ethnic group. However, Xinjiang has been traditionally inhabited by different non-Han groups centered around numerous oases. So the term Uyghur, as we use it nowadays, is a 20th century construct when various Turkic groups were put together into one ethno-identity. Uyghurs are one of the 55 officially recognized ethnic minorities in China. They are living primarily in Xinjiang. They are predominantly Muslim, and their mother tongue is Uyghur, which is a Turkic language close to, for example, Kazakh, but written in modified Arabic script, at least in China. Of course, you can find it written also in Latin, for example, in Turkey, or in Cyrillic in Kazakhstan. The change, you can see that the population structure in Xinjiang has changed dramatically since the establishment of the People's Republic of China. So you can see that in the 1940s, 80% of the Xinjiang population were Uyghurs, while about 5% Han Chinese. But nowadays, the situation is quite different, and it's about the same numbers of Uyghurs and Han Chinese living in the region. So this change of population structure shows that millions of people migrated to the region over the last couple of decades. And of course, such intense migration significantly worsened the interethnic relations between the Uyghurs and the Hans. So the Uyghurs often perceive the Han migrants as internal colonizers, supported by the government in Beijing, taking their land and resources. So the antipathy between these two groups is filled with various stereotypes and constructed boundaries. Of course, this intense migration wasn't an accident or natural phenomenon, because for the central government in Beijing, it's very convenient that the region no longer has a predominant ethnic group other than the Han that could legitimately ask for more autonomy. Therefore, nowadays, the government can and actually does say that it's has to protect all the other groups living in Xinjiang and not just the Uyghurs. The picture on the right is a typical example of Chinese propaganda depicting all the ethnic groups in China living happily together under the umbrella of the Communist Party of China. It's old poster, but you can find new renditions and even photographs nowadays, kind of in the same style. Although by the Chinese constitution, all the people in China are equal, and all the ethnic groups as well. As George Orwell would say, some are more equal. You can see that the modern looking Han Chinese worker is in the center of the picture, and all around him are the representatives of the other ethnic groups, and they're all in colorful dresses, and they're dancing, and they're playing musical instruments, and probably singing. I will get back to this kind of image shortly, so just keep the kind of the visual representation in your head. By the way, in the left corner, you can see the Uyghur girl dancing, again in a colorful dress with the braided hair and with the dopa hat. It's not really visible that well. So just brief history, recent history, 20th century history. So following the establishment of the People's Republic of China, those following decades were extremely difficult, not just for Xinjiang, but for the whole of China, because Mao Zedong's adventuristic policies of the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution left millions of deaths and devastated the economy and society of the whole country. Because of the terrible living conditions, thousands of Uyghurs and Kazakhs fled to the Soviet Union in early 60s. The situation began to look more positive after Deng Xiaoping, which is the other man, started his policy of modernization and opening up, and religious and cultural life began to flourish again in Xinjiang. However, the rapid economic growth that followed and the urbanization also increased the regional inequality and further divided Xinjiang into two socio-economic zones, basically the predominantly Han municipal areas in the north and cities and rural minority areas in the south, inhabited predominantly by the Uyghurs. The relatively liberal attitude, compared to the situation nowadays, began to change in the 1990s when the government's Strike Hard campaign followed numerous Uyghur uprisings. And since the 1990s, Beijing started to link terrorism with Islam, and substantially after the 9/11 attacks in United States and the following global war on terror. Although the official title of the region says Xinjiang is one of the 5 autonomous regions in China, the so-called autonomy looks very different. In the Chinese context, Chinese legal documents talk about freedom of religious belief, freedom to use the language or practice the culture and traditions. But as I said, the reality is often strikingly different. For example, the government officials regularly argue that the representative of the ethnic group leads the regional government and non-Han Chinese people hold many administrative positions. That is absolutely correct. But in reality, the decisive power is in the hands of the Communist Party secretary, who is always Han Chinese. And that is the same for all the other autonomous regions. So as you can see on the table, the chairman or chairwoman in case of Inner Mongolia is always of minority origin. So in Xinjiang, it will be Uyghur. In Tibet, it will be a Tibetan, who's the chairman, so officially the highest person in the region. But in reality, the highest person in the region with the real power is the CCP secretary, and that's always Han Chinese. So over the last decade, we read reports about the restricted religious practices, about mosques being closed, repurposed, or pulled down, and about people being persecuted for practicing religion, or even, for example, fasting during Ramadan. Uyghur language has been disappearing from the streets, books, and most importantly, the schools. Under the so-called bilingual education, the children have to study Mandarin Chinese already from kindergarten, while subjects taught in Uyghur practically disappear from the curriculum. Chinese government officials officially and openly state that minority languages cannot contain modern vocabulary necessary for modern science and technology. Therefore, the instruction has to be made in Putonghua, meaning the standard Chinese. And it was said by the former Xinjiang party secretary, Wang Liqian. China claims to protect the minority cultures, but what we can see in Xinjiang is kind of ongoing folklorization and uniformization, both in the portrayal and in the minority landscapes across the whole region. Here are some of the pictures I took in Kashgar in 2015. So it's a long time ago. And you can see the ruins of the old Kashgar town that was before it was pulled down. Basically, it was considered to be inscribed on a UNESCO heritage list. When it was destroyed, and these were just a few remains at 2015, I'm sure it's not existing anymore. The new city was built in somewhat Oriental style, as you can see here. This is the new old city of Kashgar with the red lampions and the signs that are, at that time, they were in Uyghur, but also in Chinese and in kind of broken English with a signage. So it was really like a tourist attraction. And the government claimed that they had to rebuild the old town of Kashgar for the safety reason, because it was kind of the adobe buildings that would be dangerous in case of earthquake, and that the hygienic standards were really low in the old town, so they had to rebuild it for better sake. And you can see the new developments also behind the old city of Kashgar. In Chinese media, ethnic minorities are often depicted as kind of exotic-looking people wearing colorful dresses. They are prized for their ability to sing and dance well, and to cook tasty lamb dishes. In the case of Uyghurs, nothing really else is left. Some handicrafts are also associated with the minorities, but nothing connected to religion, for example. So the minorities are often commodified as exotic entertainers for the modern civilized majority population. And here are some examples when you look for the pictures of Uyghurs in Chinese media outlets to have an idea what kind of pictures you get. So there are some pictures from the Global Times or Xinhua.net, and usually find pictures of happy Uyghurs dressed in colorful dresses, dancing, singing, playing music, or preparing some food, or there with the pomegranate, which symbolizes the unity of all minorities in China, based on kind of Xi Jinping speech that all minorities are like the pomegranate, the seeds kind of stick together. So that's the way they are represented. You might be wondering why Xinjiang, why this region? Because the predominantly arid landscape, scarce population could suggest the region is somewhat unimportant and almost uninhabited piece of land far from Beijing. In a way, yes, but the reality is still quite different. Xinjiang has rich natural resources, including China's largest oil and natural gas deposits. Xinjiang borders 8 countries, making it an especially strategic part of China, and also a vulnerable one if destabilized. So not surprisingly, the region was labeled a core area of Silk Road Economic Belt and kind of economic belt under the Xi Jinping Belt and Road Initiative. You probably heard about it, or the One Belt, One Road, the OBOR, that he announced in 2013, soon after becoming the leader of China. So the region's importance is economic, but also geopolitically strategic. You know that Xinjiang is also the place where all the nuclear bombs were tested in the Lopnur area, and so on. So arid and scarcely populated, but extremely important area for China. So the general attitude towards Muslim, as I said, worsened after the September 11 attacks in the US, and Beijing intensified its crackdown on the perceived separatists, religious extremists, and terrorists, the so-called three evil forces. After the announcement of the One Belt, One Road initiative, Xi Jinping also, the area increased the pacification campaign of the region and intensified the surveillance using the top-notch methods, including tracking software, face recognition cameras, iris scans, DNA sampling, and so on. And soon after that, we started to hear about the incarceration camps where reportedly hundreds of thousands, predominantly Uyghurs, were locked up and re-educated to become loyal Chinese citizens. The Chinese government vehemently denied the existence of these camps at the beginning, but after some data leaks and testimonies from the former detainees and their family members, the existence was admitted. Nevertheless, the Chinese government stated that these compounds are not prisons, but so-called vocational education and training centers, where the people prone to be influenced by the three evils learn some practical skills, they learn Chinese language, but also to love their country and its leader. Soon after, we would hear about the former detainees being sent to work across the country in different industries, what many observers call forced labor. Still, the Chinese government says it's part of the poverty alleviation program. So many international brands were accused of having unclear supply chains that might be using the enforced labor in China, including, for example, the Volkswagen or Swedish brands such as Electrolux, Ericsson, or clothing companies, including Lindex or H&M, because their subsidiaries might be using the cotton coming from the cotton industry in Xinjiang, which is, again, according to some investigations, relying on the enforced labor. Moreover, the cotton industry is one of the region's most important industries, and most of the cotton coming from China comes actually from the Xinjiang region. But it doesn't necessarily mean that all the cotton is involved in the enforced labor, of course. Here we can see some official statements regarding the so-called Vocational Education and Training Center and how the official Chinese sources explain the need for these centers and that the people are being re-educated in these centers just to have an idea. As an academic and researcher working at the university, I would like to mention one last point that personally concerns me and in many ways resembles some terrible events in the past. So according to the Tuihua Foundation, several hundred Uyghur intellectuals, including writers, academics, artists, musicians, have been detained, arrested, and imprisoned basically for maintaining the idea of a distinct Uyghur identity, something that is nowadays going against the Xi Jinping's vision of a great Chinese nation. Here I would like to mention two names of fellow academics who are admired for their work worldwide and who ended up with life sentences for what the Chinese courts call endangering state security or separatism. You probably know Professor Ilham Tohti, who was a professor at Lunds Universitet in Beijing and who started a blog, Uyghur blog, in 2006, describing the discrimination and economic hardships Uyghurs faced in Xinjiang and how Beijing's action worsened the situation. And although he only called for the autonomy that the government declared to a border region, he was declared or charged with separatism. The other professor, ethnographer Rahila Davoud, she established and directed the Xinjiang University Minorities Folklore Research Center and published widely on Uyghur folklore. She disappeared in 2017, and just a few months ago, you might hear that it was revealed that she received a life sentence as well for endangering state security. So thousands of people being arrested or detained is one thing, but we must also consider the enormous psychological harm to their families and friends, and thousands of Uyghurs living abroad have lost lost contact with their families and friends and haven't seen them for many years as they fear going home, including many friends of mine. So the future, as I said at the beginning of my presentation, I will not end it with a very optimistic prediction of the future. I will finish it with this picture I took in the capital of Xinjiang, in Urumqi. And of course, all the things I've said so far represent my own feelings and opinions. But when I see this picture, I do not feel anything. And it's not because I'm such a lousy photographer, but because it looks so generic. And it would hardly differentiate a city from other bigger cities in China. This is my fear of the future of the region and the people living there. In the future, we might be only able to find homogeneous and same-looking cities with homogeneous cultures across the whole China, everyone speaking Chinese only. And there will be probably some museums and theme parks about how the people lived before they accepted the modernity brought to them by the atheistic and predominantly Han Chinese Communist Party of China. So with this picture, I would like to thank you for listening to my
Can I just say something? Yeah. Thank you. Very clinical review. My wife and I edited last year a handbook of linguistic human rights, and it has one chapter by 3 Uyghurs, all of whom are in exile, of course, which shows something about the way, in fact, there was a very vibrant local educated culture, and this means that there were preschools right up to the end of school functioning extremely well in Uyghur language. One of these guys is actually in Norway, Abdueli Ayub,
I know.
who has just won a UNESCO prize, the Lingopax prize, for what he has been doing. The Wallenberg Library, the Human Rights Library here in Lund, has a copy of this heavy book, but it also has a chapter on Tibet and on the diversity of languages in Tibet, and another one on overall Chinese minority language policies.
Yes. If you have any comments or question, I will try to answer, of course, but
Can we say that we do have an author here who has written a book, Ögonvittnet, yeah, and you have lived in Xinjiang, so and you are here with your book, and you can tell anyone who would like to know more about the life you led in Xinjiang, and you were even in one of those concentration camps, so you do know a whole lot about the situation from the ground.
Yeah.
And you are going to be here until the whole day with your book. Yeah.
It's downstairs. You can turn downstairs.
It's downstairs.
yeah, as I said, I don't consider myself an expert. I mean, I've been to Xinjiang, but as you saw, it's been many years ago, and I think it might look significantly different from when I went there in 2015. It was still, I mean, compared to nowadays, you would say it was still relatively open. You could still go there, travel there, talk to people, but yeah, I don't think that's the case anymore.
I was surprised. I didn't know about the 80s when there was such a positive.
I would say it was positive, especially if you compare it what was before the Cultural Revolution. Then I think anything else would be positive. And when you compare it, what the situation now, but definitely in the 80s, 90s, you would see that the mosque would be rebuilt. Also, the Tibetan temples were rebuilt that were destroyed during the Cultural Revolution. So there was this kind of hype, and a lot of people would be interested in their own culture again, and not being scared of being interested in their own culture. So there would be lot of publication in Uyghurs, in Uyghur by Uyghur about Uyghurs, which now is not the case again, because the language you kind of use is Chinese again everywhere.
It's interesting to hear you describe the overall view of this.
It was really kind of simplistic,
Yes.
but yeah.
And if you combine this with reading Sayagur's book, you get a feeling for the country, for what is actually happening there. So we want your theory and we want the feelings that come with the book.
Yeah.
So please don't miss buying Sayagur if you haven't already read it.
What brought you to Xinjiang?
What brought me to
You
Xinjiang?
mentioned about I came late.
I didn't mention it, actually. No, it's basically my background, because I studied sinology initially. Then I studied international relations, but I focused on human rights. And then when I'm studying in Taiwan, and when I came back to Czech Republic and was thinking about doing the PhD, I thought on combining these, like human rights and kind of China studies together. And at the time, of course, everyone was talking about Tibet, but not that many people were talking about Xinjiang. I thought it would be an interesting area to dive in. So that's basically how it started, and I managed to go to Xinjiang at least for a short trip. But yeah, that's it. It's not really that special.
Did you meet many of the foreigners? Were you allowed to mingle? Was it already very constrained?
I think the people were still talking to you. What another colleague of mine described, the best way to talk to locals is, get on a taxi and talk to the taxi drivers, or they'll driving you around. They'll be talking to you like freely, quite openly, because it's closed and no one else hears it. So you learn a lot about their feelings. Or at the time, they would be telling me like, oh, we're quite unhappy. What's happening? Blah blah blah. And I would be able to talk to also the Han Chinese there. So it was interesting to compare, because they were also quite unhappy, and they felt themselves their disadvantage compared to the Uyghurs. So it was, quite eye-opening for me at that time. But as I said, it was 2015, many years ago.
I think what is very striking is the lack of interest from Muslims organizations.
That's
They visit Xinjiang and they think that everything is okay.
Yeah, it's
How can that be explained?
well, money first, I would say. Most of the Muslim countries are important trade partners, or China is important trade partner for them, export-import. Also, most of those countries don't exactly have the greatest human rights record. So, of course, they're not going to criticize China for breaching the human rights, because they're doing it too. So China offers them kind of new model, a new model than is the Western democratic human rights model, because China is economic, military superpower, political superpower, but with limited human rights, if we can say, or limited or not existent, actually, democracy. So I think it's attractive for them. And actually, a few months ago, before the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, even I think the president of Palestine went to China and supported China for what it's doing in Xinjiang as fighting against the terrorism. So yeah, it's sad, but yeah, I think it's never about really like the human rights values. It's always about geopolitical, geostrategical. It's about the money, but not really those great values.
I was just wondering if in your conversations with the Han, there's a general, narrative that there's this way of being, but do the regular people believe that?
I don't want to generalize, but when I talk to some of the people living in Xinjiang, they were quite upset. They would be telling me, those Uyghurs, they're getting all these governmental subsidies for being minorities. They're getting better jobs. They're easily getting to universities because they can have a lower score. So they were quite upset, because they were also like staying there. I mean, second generation. So they will be the people of Xinjiang. But because of the region and the instability, they also wouldn't have their passports. So, because people in Xinjiang, they don't, the passports are at the police stations. So they would be quite upset, actually. And they would be saying like, oh, look, we are the ones who are, kind of mistreated, not the Uyghurs.